Good afternoon, everyone. How are you doing today? What a lovely day. So, right now we are together again for another live video AMA. And if you're familiar with the channel, well, that's pretty straightforward. We are going to be together for about an hour. We have a guest with us, and that's an AMA, Ask Me Anything. So you can ask any question you want to our guest. We are right now live on a bunch of channels, including LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. And all the previous interviews are available on my YouTube channel, so that's the main place where you can find everything. If you have any questions, don't wait. There is no one moment for the questions. It's just when you have a question, or if you want to introduce yourself on the chat, just use the chat, whatever platform you're using, and I'm just monitoring everything. Before we get started, I just would like to thank our monthly members supporting me on Buy Me a Coffee. So we have Yinch and Andrea. So via my Buy Me a Coffee page, you can book either a one-to-one consulting session, buy me a coffee, just to buy a coffee, and also sponsor the next live AMA. So it's a new feature, and if you have any questions about that, feel free to drop me a message anytime. Okay, I think that's about it for the housekeeping. I see a notification on the chat. I'm not sure, but hi, Metamurai. You say cheer 100? Well, cheer to you too. Oh, yeah, cheer to you too. I don't know. Oh no, you actually sent some cheers. Okay, I saw it as a message. Well, thanks a lot for your support, Metamurai. Yeah, that's just amazing. I'm so not used to that yet that I'm even confused at what I see on the chat. So crazy. Let's jump right in. So today our guest is Simon White, who is the co-founder and CTO of Rebank. And well, as the name suggests, we are going to talk about fintech. Simon, I'm really glad to have you here today. How are you doing?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So let's get started by talking a bit about you, your background, your journey, and Rebank. What it is you're building.
Yeah, sure. Where should I start?
Well, up to you. You can tell us why you're doing what you're doing and what pushed you to start it, if it makes sense. Or you can just tell us just about Rebank and your bio, basically.
Yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about Rebank to start with, and then dig in from there, I guess. So, we like to say that Rebank is the financial operating system for startups, and what that means is we allow startups to connect all their bank accounts and financial tools and manage them in a single interface. And I guess how we came to identify this as a problem is, if you think about yourself and anyone else who's started a company who's watching, is you might start up and you open a Monzo account, and that's fine, and everything's pretty easy at that point. You use Xero and it's all fine. Then you raise your first little bit of funding and you open a Lloyd's account to put money in there. Then you maybe incorporate in Delaware so you can raise some US funding, and really quickly you've got this mess of bank accounts, financial tools, and you're a founder that, unless you're an accountant, you're probably not going to know how to manage any of this. It becomes super distracting. Becomes expensive because you get tripped up on fees, etc. So we sort of consolidate that into a single dashboard and help you manage that and save a lot of time and avoid a lot of those unnecessary banking fees, and let you get on with what matters, which is building your product. So, yeah.
Okay. So what does the app look like? You mentioned that it's a dashboard, but on the website it's also mentioned that you can make payments. So what does it look like once you're into the platform?
Yeah, when you sign up for Rebank, you connect your existing bank accounts first. So you might have your Monzo account in London, you might have a Chase account in the US, and then you see a consolidated dashboard of those accounts in that one dashboard. And we give you your overall cash holding in different currencies, your spend over time, some interesting analytics. You can categorize transactions, things like that. Payments is where we allow you to because when you start to have all these multiple bank accounts, like, okay, I've got to do my OPEX in the Chase account, I've got to do salary out of Monzo, etc. And we let you pull all that into Rebank so you can initiate those payments from Rebank instead of having to log into all those banks and manage all the, the key fob, the stupid hardware things they give you and all that. So, and yeah, part of that is we also give you a Rebank wallet, so you can move money anywhere in the world, 30 currencies, many countries for no fees at the real exchange rate. So,
okay, but just to be extra clear, you're not building a neobank, right?
No.
It's not a new Monzo or a new Revolut. It's really about managing all this account you already have.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, we have no interest in building a new bank. I mean, the Monzos and Starlings, etc., of the world are doing a really good job of that. We want to help founders when their financial needs become more complex than handling one bank account. We want to help them handle those finances for them. So, yeah.
And you mentioned founders. So is it for early stage founders, or is it for more established startups, or even at some point for corporates? Because I guess it's not the same approach to finances and to managing your finances. So what's the difference? How a corporate do things differently from a startup, and what's your main target audience there?
Yeah, we I think your very early stage startups, like pre-product, can survive with a Monzo account and they're fine. You got big corporates who have SAP and these other products that cost like $1 million a year, and then there's a big gap between there that is underserved really with this use case. So a large majority of our customers are startups that have started to grow. They're seed stage, probably pre-Series A, and then once they go through Series A, their financial needs become a lot more complicated. They're opening more accounts. They might hire a finance manager at that point, and so our user tends to go from founder into founder plus finance manager for a series anywhere from seed to Series B, typically.
Okay, so it's still at the stage where you don't necessarily have yet a CFO, and then when the CFO takes over, right? So then when you're reaching a stage where you have a CFO, then the CFO is going to use the platform still, right?
Okay. So we grow with the business.
And so still talking about your target audience and the startups, what's the main struggle for them when it comes to the finances? My guess would be that first, as a founder, you don't know what you don't know. And so that means that you don't know what really you need help with, so you can ask anyone. And also, going through this myself, when you think about financing and just managing your money, it always feels very complex, right? You don't know where to start because there is the financial aspect, purely monetary aspect and math, basically. But you also have all the regulation and everything else that you don't know about.
No, that's exactly right. I think when you first start out and you open that Monzo or the Starling account and you've got zero, you can sort of stumble your way through it without too much help, but pretty quickly tax and payments and payroll, and I mean nowadays, especially with remote first working, you've got contractors overseas and things. So it's when you are at a point in the company where your focus on product is the absolute number one priority, you're having to focus more and more on finance. It's not value add, it's just something you've got to do. So we want to take all that focus away from you, so you can do this really quickly and cheaply and focus on building your product instead, because that's what you should be doing.
That makes totally sense. And it's actually easy before that, when you don't have money. And every founder think that money is going to be the ground and will change everything. It does, but it also adds some complexity, because everything is very easy to manage if you don't have much.
But when you're bootstrapping, life is easy. I mean, it's a struggle in terms of searching for product market fit and iterating, etc. But the overheads on the business in terms of what captures your attention is near non-existent. But as soon as you raise funds, or better yet, have increasing revenues, it all gets very complicated, and it does take a lot of your attention unless you are lucky enough to be or have a co-founder that is an accountant, which most of us are not, unfortunately.
So how did you get started with this idea? Did you did some of you face that problem as a founder, or did you start it in another different mindset?
Yeah, I guess the concept was originally my co-founder Juan's idea, and he previously worked as a head of payments for a big travel company, and as they tried to expand into different regions, etc., the bottleneck for that expansion was him and having to manage all these banking and payment partnerships, and when especially in Europe, but the rest of the world now is moving towards I guess, a more open financial environment that manifested itself in terms of, or in the sense of PSD2 regulation, which you may or may not be familiar with, in the Euro economic zone. That really started to enable this use case that we've been working on, and I'd been working for a couple of startups previously. One and I met randomly around the sort of open banking community and discussed the concept and the problem. And I'd been a contractor for a while, so I knew how awful business banking was, just generally. Like it is, Monzo and Starling, etc., are doing a great job of addressing that. But prior to that, it was still abysmal, and that was only like a couple of years ago. So so that's kind of how we got started. We discussed it for a few months, and then just said it's, there's too much here to not try and fix it. So and then that was I think we wrote the first line of code in January 2018, so about 3.5 years ago, I think.
Mm-hmm. And then, so when I had a look at your website, I also saw that you closed your fundraising, your seed round in 2019. So you started the company in 2018. You managed to close your round in late 2019. So how's the team evolved during this time? Because you mentioned it yourself before. As soon as you got money, you grow your team, and lots of things get more complex. So how was it for you?
I think growing the team, like everyone will tell you this, I think, but you don't realize until you're actually doing it that hiring is probably the hardest thing that you will do as part of starting a business, not just in terms of how much time it takes, but the risk involved in hiring the wrong people at that stage of the business. I think like the Collison boys from Stripe say, don't hire anyone at that stage unless you'd be happy with 10 of them, because they will be involved in hiring the next people, and you will end up with 10 of them, whether you like it or not. So, we were very deliberate on who we hired and when. This doesn't seem to go down very well when I tell recruiters this, but so when I was hiring engineers, we interviewed I think 100 software engineers, and we made offers to 4. And I can go into why I guess the criteria that we were looking for when we did that. But I guess when the team starts to grow, things become more complicated. And I guess as a founder, your role becomes being really good at delegation, which feels counterintuitive, because you tend to feel less productive when you're not, like for me, I'm a software engineer, so when I'm not writing software, I feel less productive. But me writing software is a very low leverage activity for me to do, and it's not a good idea for me to do that in terms of scaling the company. So in terms of growing the team, we're very happy with the hires we made. We've been sort of remote first, I guess you'd say, long before COVID. We've got an employee in Australia, so we deal with not only the remote, like the location agnostic side of it, but also the time zone complexity, which is always fun, which has its pros and cons. But so it's been good. But I can dig into sort of what our criteria is for
that would be very interesting, because I think working with startups, you have to have a different mindset. And it's funny because you see a lot of startup people really putting forward the fact that their employees are from this company and that company, and usually they are from very big companies because they're proud of it. And then when they are part of your team, sometimes you realize that it's great to come from such a big company, but in the same time, they may not be suited to work in a small team because they need to have teams to, like, they have been working in a different environment. What was for you the main criteria when you were recruiting, especially on the technical aspect, I guess?
I'll talk about engineers in particular, obviously, because I was responsible for those hiring decisions. I think the industry generally has possibly gotten sucked into a standard of, like, you hire ex-Google people and ex-Facebook, etc., and that's basically all you need. Like, as long as they worked at Google, they must be brilliant, and they are probably very talented engineers, but and this kind of ties into why we interviewed so many engineers and didn't make offers to a large percentage of them, was there are engineers, like a majority of engineers are very good at some quite focused technical aspect of their role. Might be like gateway management, back-end engineering, something. But to work in a startup, you have to have that real product mindset. You can't be driven by technology decisions. You have to abstract all that away, look at the product, look at the customer, understand the problems that they're experiencing and how you can solve them in the most efficient way possible. And that's the key. I think a lot of engineers who've never worked in a startup, because the engineering industry generally, we gauge our value and how well we do our jobs of our depth of technical knowledge, but it's kind of the opposite of what you need in a startup. You need to exist up here at the customer level, and then look at the problems that they have, and then how can I solve those problems for them as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible, so you can test, learn something, and then iterate and go again. And it takes a very specific kind of engineer to do that, and they're unfortunately rare.
How do you identify them? Do you have specific question? Because that's something that is very hard to prove, right? Unless the person has worked in a startup before, it's very hard to identify if they can adapt to that. Is there any way to kind of read between the lines?
Yeah, I think you have to do a lot of experimentation with the questions that you ask. I think generally I try and I do a 30-minute phone call as just like an intro thing with everyone I speak to, and then the next stage is the technical test. But the technical test is kind of different to what you'd expect at a bigger company, because that's usually going into a deep dive of some specific technology. But what we do is we go top down. This is what we need. This is what the customer needs. Your pre-revenue, pre-product market fit. Tell me how you design this to both move really quickly, but also not create a headache, like a technical mess that you're going to have to deal with in 3 months' time. And how do you make that balance? And the engineers who do really well in that are the ones who really take time to understand and clarify the user requirements, and don't just dive straight into the technology and start designing sharded databases and things that don't matter at that scale. That's generally how I would attack that. There's a question I ask in our interview process that not everyone would do or might not even agree with, but it's not really a question. During that exercise, I'll find something that I don't necessarily agree with that person on, and I'll really press them to justify their answer. And it's not because I want to it's not because I'm disagreeing with them or whatever. I want to see how they react to their technical opinion being challenged. And a good response is, yeah, that's really interesting. Can you point me to some resources that I could look at and then get back to you? A bad response, to the point that it's an immediate no from us, and this has happened, is they immediately get defensive. And so that's but it's all, you've just got to, like you do with product, you've got to iterate over your hiring process, find what questions work, and of course it's about as much about you selling the company to the employee as it is them
Yes.
showing that they can be valuable to you. Because obviously for the culture of the company, that's very important, but also engineers are very highly in demand. So,
yeah. Well, luckily, you can now hire people from all over the world, so that opens some doors, but then that also adds some complication when it comes to time zones and culture also. You mentioned working with someone in Sydney, not in Sydney, in Australia, and I remember when I was working with someone in Australia, finding time to schedule a meeting was a bit complex. That was the hardest part.
Yeah, definitely. And the key to managing that well is mastering asynchronous communication.
Yeah.
It's harder, but when you get it right, you can hire anyone in the world, and it works pretty well. So falling back to synchronous communication and needing meetings to go through something is a symptom of a much bigger problem with internal communications. We're pretty constantly looking at that, and we do between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. we do no meetings, so it's just deep work and asynchronous comms. So
it's good to be able to focus. We have some question on the chat. So we have Yinch asking, is there a minimum size above which Rebank services become cost effective?
I think generally if you have, like, if your finance needs are very simple and you're getting by with your Monzo account and Xero, and most people can figure out the basics of Xero. You probably don't need us at that point, to be honest. It's when either your banking needs are becoming more complicated, like you have multiple accounts, or you're starting to make a lot of payments, especially foreign exchange. That's when we become highly cost effective, especially in comparison to some other foreign exchange payment providers and banking services, etc. So as soon as you feel that pain that you're spending just too much time and you don't really know what to do, that's when you should come and see us.
We have now Roy, who I think has been on your website, because they're asking, what was it like to build an operating system? And that's because that's a wording you're using on the website, yes?
It's not an operating system in terms of a computer operating system.
Yeah, you're not building iOS, but
Yeah, I guess at the higher level, we say operating system in terms of orchestrating multiple services and standardizing them across regions. That's a complex engineering task. It's a kind of task I very much like, is taking a lot of complexity and hiding it from users. We have to integrate with banks, payment providers, accounting software, etc., from all different regions. So we have customers in the UK, Europe, America, Australia, Canada, I think. And abstracting all of those different data sources into one is quite complicated, and it's a very iterative learning process, like lots of other things are. We've redesigned that engine for pulling in data and processing payments maybe 3 times now. And we've learned a lot each time and become increasingly efficient with how we do that. But we haven't had to do that in some time now, so I think we're pretty much on top of it. But it's a challenge, but if you like those sorts of engineering challenges, it's a very good one to go after.
And I guess it brings us to Yinch, or the questions on overcoming the cross-border legal entity requirements. For example, for taxes, it may change also from one country to another. How do you have to manage that? And do you really have to manage that?
We don't so much, in the sense that we work with regulated banking and payment providers across multiple regions, and we go through a sort of approval and KYC process with them. So for a company like ours to work, because financial regulation is very region specific, so you can't, it doesn't make sense at the earlier stages of a company like this to try and get your own licenses in every region. It just doesn't work. Like you need to be able to find strategic partners who are already licensed, who you can leverage off in those jurisdictions. And then once you get to the scale that is, or that it makes sense to do that yourself, then you do it then. But it doesn't make sense to do it early on.
Okay, and bunch of very interesting questions there. Another question on cryptocurrencies. Does this affect in any way your business model or any other ways?
Yeah, not immediately. I think I have some opinions on cryptocurrency that I'll spare you from for now, because we'll take up the rest of the time. But
yes.
Something I do keep an eye on is, because a lot of our customers use us to move funds around the world, and we want to make that as fast and affordable for them to do. And we do quite a good job of that. But depending on where those funds go, us and every other bank and provider in the world has to rely on old payment systems like Swift. So I've always kept an eye on things like the Stellar network that are looking at sort of bridging that gap and making international money remittance more efficient with that technology. I don't think it's mature enough yet for us to go down that route and for businesses to trust their fund, like large amounts of funds over that route. With consumers, like if you're sending £100 or something, it's fine. But our customers are sending, 5, 6, 7 figures. So we, something we keep an eye on, but nothing we're working on right now.
And I think it's worth mentioning also that some new banks, like I don't know about Monzo, but Revolut enabled you to buy cryptocurrencies. Yeah. But then they are partnering with other services, so everything can be done through the app. But what they are licensed to do is kind of decomposed, and so it's not, even if some banks apps offer you the opportunity to buy cryptocurrencies, it's kind of separated from their main business. Another question: can Simon share what is one unexpected mistake that Rebank made during its growth, and one unexpected perk, or I guess positive things?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Founders, if you've ever started a company, you know that to be successful, your successes have to just slightly outweigh the number of mistakes that you make. So you're going to make a lot. You're going to make less the second time and the third time. Juan and I are both first-time founders, so we like everyone has made a lot of mistakes. I think from my point of view, probably the biggest mistake one of the mistakes that I definitely avoid making again is we focused a bit too much on technical scalability a lot earlier than we needed to. So probably the number one bit of advice I would give any first-time founders or CTOs is ignore all the industry noise about Kubernetes and service mesh and all that. Keep everything as simple as you can for as long as you can. A monolith on Heroku is your friend, and because the only thing that matters at that stage of the company is iterating, learning from your customers, testing, and going again. That's all that matters. Unexpected perk. We got into Y Combinator. I think that was a big victory for us after a very long journey of bootstrapping, being told no from lots of investors, lots of accelerators, and then we got into Y Combinator in 2019, which was a fantastic experience. So that's probably the unexpected perk, I guess, if you call it that.
And I want to get back to that right after, but before, I'd like to talk a bit more about your own experience. You mentioned that you have worked with startups before, you are on the CTO and you're focusing on the technical aspect. How has your role evolved over time, and is there anything in your previous jobs that really helped you for this role to be CTO? But because you're the CTO, but you're also the co-founder, which is can sometimes be tricky.
I guess I'll start with my I don't know, career to date, I guess, and then dive into how that's helped. So I studied computer science at university. I sort of fell into working for the Australian government, like the immigration department. I worked on some defence, military systems, etc. And that was really great in lots of ways, because you work on half billion dollar systems, and it's very interesting. But I guess for me, you realise that government is 10 years behind everything else. It moves incredibly slowly. You're so far removed from the goal of the project, and it wasn't an environment that gelled very well with me. And I think subsequently, and a lot of founders would probably say the same, is I wasn't a great employee, because especially in big companies, they hire you to do a very specific job, and they're not that interested in your opinions about what you're doing outside of that. So, I don't really keep my mouth shut when I have an opinion, and I get super frustrated when I know there's a more efficient way to do something and nothing gets done about it. So I'm not a great employee in that sense. So I left the public service, so to speak, and then moved to London. Got a job with a startup. It was a fintech startup called FinCluster, which was a retail, it was an investment platform for retail investment advisors. It was like a small team of 5 of us. It was great. It was really good fun, but it didn't last long. Unfortunately, it ran out of money. And then I went to work for a small sort of incubator. I worked on 3 or 4 different startups, just helping them go from nothing to MVP. And that was definitely helpful in terms of, I think that experience helps you prepare for a startup, because if you come from a big company and go into a startup, you still have this feeling that there's someone above you that can come in and just fix everything if everything goes wrong. And that's not the case. Like, there's just you and your team, and that's it. So, I think towards the end of my time at this incubator, I was really looking to start something of my own, and I'd been looking at this financial regulation, and then speaking to Juan, obviously, and and just took the dive, really. I think a lot of people fall into a trap of trying to do this in a very piecemeal way. Like, I'll just go and work at this, I'll stay at my company so I can learn this for another 5 years, then I'll work for another startup. And like, if you want to do it, just go and do it. That's the only way you're really going to learn about it and immerse yourself in it. So just go and start. Like, the worst thing that happens is you fail and you dust yourself off and go again. So
definitely. So it's interesting that you work with an incubator. I didn't notice that, and I didn't pick it up. So right now I'm involved in the startup ecosystem in many ways, and I really love being involved in some Slack groups and Discord chats, but quite often I chat with other founders and we talk about non-technical stuff. We talk about funding and marketing. Yeah. Is there something similar for CTOs? I have my CTO, and I don't know if he ever looked for it, but is there some place somewhere where other CTO you can ask question or just exchange with other CTOs?
Yeah, there's a couple of CTO meetups in London. Obviously, that's not been particularly active given lockdown, etc. But I actually find Reddit quite interesting for conversations like that. Reddit is, it's Reddit. There's lots of good things on there and not so good. But I think that's a good place to start. But I'm always a fan of, if you're lacking, if you've got questions that you can't find answers to, email some CTOs. And you might end up like starting a community of your own. And I've done that. I've reached out to a few people at companies that I admire, especially when we were first starting out with Rebank. I went and met with a few CTOs, and I think the tech community generally, if you approach it the right way, the people are always happy to help and give advice, etc. So that was really good for us, and I think that's it. I think.
And you mentioned earlier how important it is to start delegating, especially as soon as you start having your own team.
Yeah.
What has changed the most for you since, well, when you started the company and then getting your first round of funding and then today leading the team to the next step?
Yeah, I think, I mean, especially when you go in as a CTO who was a software engineer, I mean, you stop doing engineering, and that's a really it's a big adjustment because again, you become a manager, but you're also the founder. So you are responsible for leading engineering, but also the vision and understand the vision of the company, understanding customers, etc. So yeah, I think that's the biggest change is just stepping away from the day-to-day technical stuff.
Is it hard?
Yeah, it's hard. It sucks in lots of ways, and I do miss it. I do bits and pieces here and there, but only when we have spillover or something. But that is the role, and I see some CTOs stay hands-on for way too long, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know it's hard to let go of, and we do enjoy coding. That's what we do. But your I think number one responsibility is to make sure that your role is incredibly high leverage. So, hiring is a very high leverage activity. Raising funds is a very high leverage activity. Putting systems in place to learn from your customers quickly is a high leverage activity. Coding is not. That is just you putting an hour of your time into an hour of code output, and you need to scale your output really quickly. So yeah, I've adjusted over time. It's definitely takes some getting used to, though.
You mentioned also being involved in the fundraising. How involved were you in this stage, in this process?
I think so. When we started the fundraising process, both of us were pretty heavily involved, but then it just didn't make sense for me to be that heavily involved. Like, we're two of you, because fundraising becomes a full-time job for anywhere from 2 months to a year, depending on what round you're raising, etc. So yeah, it eventually became my co-founder sort of running that, and then I took over everything else, and I get involved in the later conversations, which I think is a good way to do that. Investors should really be competing for the other founder's time, the one that they're not talking to. Yeah. So you don't get the privilege of having everyone in every conversation. You earn that by learning about the business, you suss each other out, and then once you're getting towards term sheet stage, then you get everyone else involved. So it's way more efficient with time that way.
It is. I remember talking to investors about a year ago, and I really had to explain them that no, my co-founder wouldn't be joining the call, and maybe one call if they have technical questions, but usually that was it. He wasn't going to spend his time just repeating the same thing to other people, and you can't, especially when you're a small team, you can't have all your resources just doing the exact same task. Like, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and your number one job still is to be building a product that your customers love. Like, investing, taking investment or raising money is a secondary task, and it should be treated as such. So, I think when we were raising, I sort of got involved in later technical due diligence and then final meeting type stage. And I think most sophisticated investors understand that and actually support it as well. So
it's all about finding the right people who understand you, and from day one. You mentioned also going through Y Combinator, which is one of the most praised and well-known accelerator program. I know that there's lots of accelerators where it's so intense for the founders that it can be frustrating, because when you are in the early days, you need to get going, you need to build the platform, you need to build your product. And so these accelerators are quite often focusing on growth, on clients. And so it can be frustrating sometimes as a technical co-founder. not just to be able to work on the product because you're so busy having meetings with mentors and everyone else. Was it like this for you at Y Combinator, or not at all? Or maybe because of your stage it was different?
Yeah, Y Combinator is, I mean, yeah, they have the reputation they do because they are very, very good at what they do. And so the whole goal is for you to go in with probably a growth target. For most companies, your SaaS companies, they'll tell you to 5x that and then push you really, really hard to make it. And 80% of the time, your head's down, just working on building the product, getting customers, and then you meet with your group partners once a week, and you'll have a one-on-one with one of the partners like once a week, or 2 or 3 times a week if you want it. But it's they insist on you being hyper focused on actually building the product to the point like feel free to use your investment to buy takeout every night if it stops you cooking for an hour every day. Like heads down, build. That's all that matters.
That's good. We have actually a tricky question on the chat. Could you have succeeded without Y Combinator in fulfillment?
I mean, you don't need something like Y Combinator or investment or whatever. You've just got to make the decision as to whether it's going to be a worthwhile experience. And something like Y Combinator, I think the number of companies that it wouldn't help is very small. Just the power of having that brand associated with you, and the de-risking it does for the rest of your funding rounds, hiring it makes a huge difference if potential future employees see that on your company profile. They teach you an awful lot. Yes, we could have, but it did make a huge difference to us. I hear some founders say, because the standard deal, like everyone gets the same deal, it's 7% on a safe for 150,000, and they say, that valuation's not very good. Like your pre-product market fit, like your company's not worth anything. Like it could be 7%, it could be 60%. It's not worth anything right now. So that 7% is going to because I'd go through it again and just give them the 7% and not even take the money. That's how much value we got out of it. So you could you can always succeed. It's just a strategic decision what's gonna be impactful for you, and you should always think about that with any kind of hiring, fundraising, accelerators. I think 99.5% of accelerators are completely useless. There's less than a handful that I would recommend. The rest are all not worth it, which I can go into maybe at another time. But
no, I think it's a very good point, and without necessarily getting into too much details, it's important for every founder to just think about what they want out of an accelerator, and if it also worth the time, because it can be time consuming too. And so it's some of them are good, some of them are less good. Then it all depends on the deal you got and how helpful it is. So that's something you need. I think that for any kind of program, you need to consider what you need to reach your next step, and is it going to help you? Because depending on your stage, it may also just not be the right moment for you to join such a program.
Yeah, you've got to. I think it's important to pick, not only if you do something, but when you do something. I think we might have even done Y Combinator maybe 6 months too early in hindsight. I mean, it was still excellent, but if we went back, we might have pushed it 6 months just to give us more time to build the product. But it is what it is. So it was still an amazing experience. But you've just got to make those decisions based on the information you have, and not spend a huge amount of time making them either. Just you've got the information you've got, make a decision, move on. You're going to have 1,000 others to make, so get on with it.
I think one of the big questions also when you go through such program is what happened after demo day. You do your big pitch, your fundraising, and then what happened?
Yeah, well, you do your pitch, and then you go through the fundraising process, which is anywhere from a day to 6 months. Most companies sit at around 2 to 3 months it takes to close that round, and then I think it's Paul Graham describes like there's like a trough after, because you do YC, you have the TechCrunch launch, and then you sort of just fall into a trough, and that happens for most companies. It happened to us in a lot of ways, but you sort of snap back to reality. It keeps you focused on what you should be doing, which is at that point probably hiring. Because we straight after we raised, we pretty much went into 6 months of head down hiring. We're a team of 9 in total now, so we're still quite small, but we put an awful lot of time and effort to make sure that we hired the kind of people that we wanted for this stage of the business.
And one of the big questions I usually see about YC is about the application, because there is a huge amount of people applying. And now, especially now that it's fully remote, anyone from anywhere in the world can apply.
Yeah.
Have you done anything different or anything special for your application that you can share, or any tips on that?
Yeah, I do a lot of I review a lot of applications for companies who are trying to get accepted into YC. I do a lot of practice interviews as well, so I've seen quite a few mistakes that companies make. I think the biggest tips I'd give for anyone who is trying to apply to YC is validate 3 questions, and nothing else matters outside of these 3. Is are you solving a problem? Is one. The second one is, are you solving a problem that people care about? And is the number of customers you have available to you going to be enough to sustain the business, which is market size, basically. Answer those 3 questions to start. And then clarity of communication is paramount. You've got to remember that they get something like 14,000 applications. They accept maybe 300 companies. If you submit 6 pages of just faff text, they're probably just going to throw your application in the bin. So you've got to boil it down to the clearest description of what you're doing: problem, solution, this is the market, this is what we understand about our customers, and do that. I've got a lot more advice on that, but we'll probably run out of time. So happy to people contact me on Twitter all the time to ask for practice interviews and stuff. So anyone who's listening who would like the same, feel free to do so.
Fantastic. Yes, and that's great 3 tips. I mean, that's applicable, right? And I know we all saw the small box from Google. We're using Google Meet, and it's this week that they announced that now you can't have a meeting more than 1 hour, and that's just crazy. They're all doing that. Like, that's just ridiculous, and they are doing it today without sending anyone a message or anything. Crazy. Okay, so anyway, we are reaching the end of this interview. Anyway, do you have any other resources that you find useful for potentially founders or aspiring founders, especially people who are technical and who would like to at some point build their own startup?
Yeah, I think especially if you're technical, just resources that will help you. I guess wrap your mind around focusing on products and problems rather than technology. So Paul Graham's essays are excellent. All the sort of the startup Bible type books like Lean Startup, 0 to 1. What's the other one? I've forgotten. The Hard Thing About Hard Things is really good as well. YC Startup School is excellent. It's fully like online now. It used to be like a semi sort of batch thing, but anyone can do it now. It's a really great resource. It's free. It's written by some of the best entrepreneurs in the world, so very highly recommend that. We did that before getting accepted, about 6 months before we got accepted. So very highly recommend. And go and speak to some founders.
Yes.
The best thing you can do, I think. It's probably a mistake I made, is not speak to enough founders before I started, because there's a lot of things they would have told me that I wouldn't have had to find out on my own. So just email 30 founders at companies you like, a handful will respond, and they'll give you some really good info.
That's definitely great tips, and sometimes I just feel so lucky to be involved in the startup ecosystem. It prepares you a lot, just seeing all the founders what they do, and even just asking questions here on the chat. That's an opportunity to also learn from other people's experience.
Yep.
Well, I guess that's going to be it for today because I didn't plan for Google Meet to stop working. So we are going to wrap up early. Sorry, Roy, I saw your question. Well, if you have further question, you can contact Simon directly. And yeah, that's it for today. Thanks a lot, Simon. Where can we find you? I put your Twitter on the stream. Is there any other places where people can find you and your company?
Yeah, Twitter and or you can email me directly, simon@rebanknow.com.
Fantastic. And I'll put the link to your company in the description. So thank you a lot for your time, Simon. And thanks everyone for joining us today. So the video of today is going to be available on my YouTube channel on Monday afternoon. So if you're not yet subscribed, check it out right now and be sure to subscribe while you're there. Thanks a lot again to Yinch and Andrea for being monthly subscribers on my Buy Me a Coffee page. And the next stream will be in 2 weeks. So in 2 weeks, we'll just do a coffee catch up. So it's a really chill out format where we talk about community's project, what you're really going through, your own challenges. And then the next live AMA will be 2 weeks after that. So I will be announcing the next guest on my social media, especially on Twitter. So if you want to reach out to me or know more about our future guest, feel free to just drop me a line on Twitter or at me anytime. And as you can see right now, we have lost Simon. Next time, I'm going to plan ahead for that. I didn't expect Google Meet to enforce that right now. But thanks a lot for all your very interesting questions. So yeah, also I didn't mention that if you want to discuss with other founders, you can also join my Discord group. It's quite nice, friendly, and always ready to answer your questions if you want to exchange with other founders or makers or people who are just building stuff. And that's it for today. Thanks a lot for joining us, and I'll see you in 2 weeks or anytime on social media. Enjoy the weekend. Enjoy this lovely, lovely weather right now, and I'll see you soon. Bye, everyone.